Nobody can be everywhere at once, it's just not possible. As much as you'd like to accomplish in your life, doing it all remains in the fantasy category for sure. This can be said about the most prolific of people, including what is likely the most famous demonologist duo of all time, Ed and Lorraine Warren. While their list of investigations is impressive and their impact in the way we see the paranormal is undeniable, there are simply too many ghost stories out there, and a lot of them might be better known if the Warrens showed up at some point. So today we're going to be counting down the top 5 demons who should have been investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren. Let's get right into it. Coming in at number 5, we've got the House of Death. When you've got a name like that, there's no avoiding paranormal investigators. How deadly do you have to be to earn that kind of title? And as it turns out, quite deadly indeed. There aren't too many people who stay here and avoid ghosts altogether, and some people even end up being attacked. The House of Death has quite the history too, with all sorts of famous individuals, both skeptics and believers, telling tales of terror. It might look like a fairly nondescript home in New York City's Greenwich Village, but this house is anything but boring. After the initial homeowners left it behind, strange things started happening. A famed cyclist ended up hitting a young boy, breaking his leg. Mark Twain moved in, and even after being skeptical of ghosts, experienced all sorts of strange events. Even though he wasn't there very long and didn't enjoy his stay very much, Twain has been rumored to roam the hallways of the House of Death. He's apparently one of the friendlier entities who stick around too. Years later, occupants experienced even more disturbing things, from monstrous moving shadows to terrible, cloyingly sweet scents overpowering all who entered. Rotten food was found upon tables with no explanation, and freezing cold temperatures in extremely specific places were found. It got to the point where they had to bring in a paranormal investigator who did indeed confirm that more than 20 spirits were inhabiting the House of Death. Not all of them were friendly either. Another author moved into the house, completed a manuscript, and then died under mysterious circumstances. A family moved in after that, and after a wild bender, the father murdered his daughter in a vicious attack. So even though the paranormal investigator had come through and confirmed there were indeed presences in the house, nothing was really done about it. Had the Warrens attempted an investigation, who knows what could have happened. Although the duo found themselves under a fair deal of scrutiny in relation to their investigations. Skeptics claimed and still claim that they were frauds, so it is possible that their visit would have simply sold a few more books. Regardless of the efficacy of the visit, the Warrens would have brought more attention to the house and possibly discovered more about the ghosts and demons supposedly living within. Coming at number 4, we've got Robert the Doll. Why not add another doll to the Warrens' long list of paranormal investigations? I think having Robert in the same room as Annabelle would result in some fascinating happenings. Even if nobody witnessed them in person, the stories would be legendary beyond compare. Imagine a crossover movie with both famous playthings somehow duking it out. The possibilities are endless. Hell, there's even a series of Robert movies. Definitely a cheap cash in on the success of the Annabelle flicks, but what do you expect, right? After making his way across the United States over the course of about 100 years, Robert now sits at the East Martello Museum. Anyone who does not properly respect the doll during a visit will be cursed and suffer a terrible fate. Some perish in car crashes, others have brushes with death. But Robert is said to be pulling the strings in the background the entire time. Holy smokes, right? Even though Robert mostly resides at the museum, regularly rotating to the old post office and custom house, he has been investigated and exhibited by other paranormal enthusiasts. Zach Bagans featured the doll in one of his TV shows, introducing the creepy collectible to all sorts of new people. He didn't seem to have any negative reaction to the demonic toy though, so who knows what was going on. But if Bagans can do it, I doubt the Warrens would have any issues with expecting Robert. In fact, it's pretty surprising they never managed to get their hands on the doll in their days of demonology. It would definitely be interesting to hear their take on the matter. Maybe Robert wasn't a big fan and they didn't want any additional misfortune to befall them. Oh well, I'm still rooting for that Robert-Annabelle crossover. Coming at number 3, we've got Franklin Castle. A lot of haunted houses gain their reputation through mysterious death and misfortune. Franklin Castle has both of these in spades. It also helps that it's known as a castle, arguably the spookiest and most prone to hauntings of all the architectural forms. Classic spooky castle stuff, you get it. In the late 19th century, all sorts of bad stuff went down within the walls of Franklin Castle, and to this day, people claim to see the results. Hans Tiedemann and his family lived there and seemed to be doing quite well. That is, until all 4 of his adolescent children died under mysterious circumstances. Yeah, that's not suspicious at all. Some claim that he hung his daughter and staged it to look like she did it herself. My goodness. His mistress simply disappeared one day as well, adding to the questionable bits and pieces. Could he have been possessed by a demon? Are their spirits demons now? Now, visitors often see mysterious figures floating through the hallways, moving objects around and doing generally ghastly things throughout the castle. There have even been ghostly parties thrown, the shining style. lifestyle. Whether these ghosts are friendly or frightening is still up in the air. However, we may have learned more about the paranormal residents if the Warrens made a trip to Cleveland. They could reveal all sorts of new details and potentially even upset the ghosts, resulting in some ramped up haunting. Damn. Coming in number 2, we've got Gina. When was the last time you saw a live exorcism? Like, really, it can't be happening that often. And even then, the folks involved are usually just the interested parties, families of the possessed, and those performing the exorcism itself. So what happens when somebody has their exorcism aired on live television? Well, all sorts of craziness, of course. In the early 90s, ABC aired an exorcism live on TV, showing America just what happened when a 16-year-old claims she's possessed by demons. Not one, but 2 demons. Now, there's a lot of controversy related to this particular case, and I'm sure if the Warrens were involved that would only increase. But it's a very interesting case study from an era before the internet was intense as it is today. A girl named Gina, who had a rocky upbringing, claimed that she was possessed by 2 demons. One was named Minga, the other Zion. She would often fall into trances where one of these demons would make themselves known, speaking strangely and acting violently. After many visits from holy people, for whatever reason they decided that Gina's exorcism would be aired on television. This was widely questioned, and many wondered why the church would allow this. Exorcisms are traditionally a private ritual, kept away from prying eyes as often as possible. Of course, this isn't always the case, and there have been plenty of public exorcisms throughout history. Apparently they wanted the public to see that the devil was real and that the church could provide relief for people who were under his influence. But when this exorcism was aired, a lot of folks saw something other than the devil. They saw a young woman who had experienced in her life and wasn't being provided with the psychiatric support she needed. Exorcism was a very controversial method of helping this girl who may have benefited from therapy, and doing it on such a public stage might have caused additional problems. Of course, the Warrens thrived on public paranormal displays, so they would have fit right into this equation. Would it have been the right choice though? And finally at number 1, we've got the Bell Witch. Try not to piss off your neighbors, because if you make them mad enough, you might find yourself under the influence of a curse. Damn. Somehow the Warrens never seemed to make it out to the location of the Bell Witch's curse. In Adams, Tennessee, there once lived a woman named Katie Batts. After being cheated out of some land by her neighbor, John Bell, she swore she would haunt him for the rest of time. On her deathbed, she confirmed this curse and passed on to the other side. Following this spooky promise, the Bell family found themselves in a difficult situation. They would be attacked by invisible assailants, heard terrifying noises throughout their house, and witnessed chimeric animals visiting their farm. Katie Batts was still sticking around and using her demonic presence to haunt the Bells. Some say you can still feel her influence on the property, which includes a reconstructed cabin and a cave that is said to be just as haunted. My word, do you think these demons would have cemented the Warrens' legacy even further? They're such divisive figures now, who knows if these visits would have panned out well.
The majority of people would say they don't believe in ghosts and demons, but usually there is an event in our lives that changes this. Sometimes something so scary happens you have no choice to believe, so we are back with part 3 of the top 5 real demons who contacted the living. Let's jump into it. Coming in at number 5, we have Happy Birthday. A young family moved home into a house that they were aware someone had passed away in. The old man had died unexpectedly of natural causes when he was in his mid-40s. He passed away right in the middle of the living room. The couple had a daughter who was 2 years old. Soon after they moved in, she began to speak about ghosts that live in the home. Halloween had just passed and they thought she was just being an impressionable child. Her favorite book at the time was a Halloween-themed picture book. They assumed the talk of ghosts came from reading this book so often. She was always telling them stories about the ghost in her playhouse or playing on the stairs. She would even point to them in the corner of the room and tell them he was standing there. She was never afraid of the ghost, so they didn't seem concerned about it. The mother told the ghost that he was welcome to stay, but also that he was welcome to go if he wanted. They figured if he was a happy, friendly ghost, there was no harm in it. The couple were unsure if they believed the ghost was real until one day. It was a cold, rainy day and they were getting ready to go to daycare. Their daughter said that the ghost was out on the back deck. She said, "It's the ghost's birthday today. We need to sing him happy birthday." Again, thinking this was her obsession with birthdays, they sang along, wishing the ghost a great birthday. As they were leaving, the little girl made a comment to her parents. He said, "You guys should be careful, or the bad guy might get you guys too." This comment seemed a little off. She had said only positive things regarding the ghost so far, but this seemed like a sinister warning. After they dropped her off at school, they looked up the previous resident. The mother was shocked to find out that it was his birthday the day he died. She didn't believe in ghosts, but how would the little girl know this? His death was unexpected at a young age, so he could be warning about something sinister in the home. If there was already one ghost, it could be there was something not as friendly, also able to communicate with the family. Coming in at number 4, we have shadow people. Auspicious, the Reddit user, often suffers from eye migraines. She explains that this means she doesn't feel the pain of the migraine, but she often sees shapes and auras in the room. There was one day when she knew a migraine was coming on for her. She started to see shapes like shadows around her room. She didn't think anything of it at first, as this is something that she has experienced many times. But she noticed one of the shadows was not moving around her eye like the others. This one resembled a man against the wall. She suddenly felt a cold breath on her neck. She moved her hand to feel it when she felt like something grabbed her hand. She ran out of the room, terrified. It was hard to deal with the situation and run while she was dealing with the migraine, as it can affect your ability to move around. She called her boyfriend to come around and explained how terrified she was. He looked around the room and sat in the room alone for a while to make her feel at ease. He felt no presence or paranormal feelings while he was in there. She was adamant it was a demonic presence. She felt the cold breath chill her whole body and she had no doubt. She refused to ever sleep in that room alone ever again. Coming in at number 3, we have premonition. This one is more of a helpful contact than a bad one, but is so crazy that it deserved a spot on the list. It happened when a young boy was 7 and his brother was 4. They were with their mother in their car. They were on their way home like they would on any other day. He was playing with his brother in the back of the car as they usually would. They pulled the car into drive and suddenly felt the air go cold. Their mother's expression dropped as if she had just seen a ghost. She slowly turned to look at her children and told them to remain silent and not to move. Being young, they didn't understand and asked what was happening. She said they needed to be quiet for a little longer. She suddenly reversed the car off the driveway and drove away as fast as she could. She rang her husband, who was a cop. She told him to get to the house now. He was attempting to ask why, but she just adamantly told him to do it now. She drove around for a little longer, scrambled by what had just happened. All the while, the children had no clue what was going on. She finally drove back home and pulled into the driveway. There was a man being handcuffed and taken away. As they entered the home, the cops and her husband wanted to know what happened and what she had seen when she pulled onto the driveway. What she said stayed with the young boys. She said she didn't see anything. When she pulled onto the driveway, she felt an entity with her in the car, and they told her a premonition that someone was waiting for her outside of her home with a knife. That if she did not turn around, he would pull out a 12-inch blade and force the family into the home. They told her she needed to take her children and run, or something tragic was about to happen to all of them. The detective and her husband were speechless. They had just arrested a man outside of the house matching the exact description she gave, and he had on him a 12-inch blade. She still doesn't know who the entity was or why they would warn her about the fate of her family, but she was forever grateful and in shock about what had happened to her. Coming in at number 2, we have Ouija board. Just in case anyone needs to hear it, never use a Ouija board. This story started when a group of high school kids decided they would go to an abandoned building with a Ouija board on Halloween. It is said that on Halloween the barrier between the living and the other side is thin, meaning that more paranormal events can happen. It is easier for spirits and demons to pass over to the living realm during the night of Halloween. The group of kids decided they would go around 3 AM on Halloween to try and connect with the spirits. Being kids, they were not completely prepared for what might happen. They had done a little research on using a Ouija board, but they were not prepared for what happened. They arrived and prepped for their game. They lit candles and all joined in a circle. They asked if anyone was there. The pointer moved and it said yes. They asked a few more questions, but nothing was clear to any of them. The movement became erratic and the pointer flew off the board and all of the candles blew out. They all became scattered and they forgot to close out their game. If you don't say goodbye, you risk inviting any spirits back home with you. Although they were spooked, they figured it may have been a prank by one of the group. They laughed it off and all went home. The real horror came later once one of the boys went to sleep. He said something happened to him during the night. He woke up feeling uncomfortable. He described his vision as feeling like TV static, a feeling of heaviness surrounding him. He looked around the room and that is when he saw a bloody and charred face with red piercing eyes looking at him through the window. When he saw the face, it smiled at him. He then heard a voice in his ear, like the demon was right behind him as he sat up in bed. The voice said, "You wanted to talk to me." The boy ran from the room as fast as he could. He stayed awake until daylight. He returned to his room and saw no sign of the demon. He called his friends, who all had bad experiences that night as well, but each different. They were all shaken and vowed to never use a Ouija board again, or even speak of that night. And finally, in at number 1, we have old skin. This one might at first seem like just a bad dream. But it turned out to be much more terrifying than that. One Reddit user told the story of a bad dream that she had had once. She had been having this dream every day for about a week. It started with her being lost in the woods. She didn't recognize the location. She was approached by a decrepit old man who wore a big coat and a top hat. The shadows made it hard to make out his face. He referred to himself in the third person. He told her that his name was Old Skin. After he introduced himself, a pack of wolves would appear from nowhere. He would say to her, "Old Skin's gotta get away from the wolves." The wolves chased him through the woods as she followed. Eventually the wolves caught him and he continued to narrate what was happening. He spoke in a monotone voice and said, "Old Skin is being eaten alive. Old Skin is going to die." She then wakes up. She has the feeling like she is falling and then wakes up in a sweat. The weirdest part about the dream is that when she finally spoke to her brother about what had been happening and why she had not been sleeping well, he turned to look at her and asked, was his name Old Skin? He then went on to explain how he had been experiencing the exact same thing. They were both shaken. They couldn't understand how they could have a shared dream. The only explanation they could find was that there may be demon's energy in that home. They both sleep in the same house and you're most vulnerable when you sleep. They believed it was a message from the demon to them. Once they said his name out loud, the demon never haunted their dreams again. I wonder what might have happened if they had both kept their nightmares to themselves. Demons do not seem to be shy. Whether it's possession of an object or of a person, they take any chance to communicate with the living. These stories are terrifying, so hopefully nothing like this has ever happened to you. So let's jump into the top 5 real demons who contacted the living. Coming in at number 5 we have Shadow Dog. One Reddit user told the story of a contact she had with a demon when she was younger. Her parents had just divorced when she was a teenager. She decided that she would live with her mother in her new home. As soon as she moved in, she started to experience some paranormal activity. It started small. She'd be reading her books on her bed when she suddenly felt an icy chill take over her. Then she would feel like she was being watched by an entity that hated her. But obviously there was no one else in the room. She said when she felt this, she would leave her house and go for a walk for more than an hour. Usually by this time the feeling had passed. She then started to see shadows behind her, like there was someone stood in the room with her. This started to get worse when she would see the shadows move around her bedroom walls. They were getting bolder in their contact with her. The demon then started to imitate their family dog. She thinks this might have been a way to trick her into making a physical connection with the demon, allowing it to take full possession. The demon would make a growling noise from under her bed, like her dog was in need of help. The dog had refused to enter the room for months at this point, so she was not fooled by the demon. After this, she could not stay there anymore, with the demon becoming bolder and increasingly active. She moved in with her father and she never experienced anything paranormal again. I do appreciate that she was like, screw you mum, I'm leaving, you stay with the dog in this haunted house. Her mother's probably gone now, R.I.P. Demon got her. In at number 4 we have texting the devil. Demons could choose any form of communication with the living. They are not bound by our laws of reality. Sometimes they choose possession, others will only talk through a medium or Ouija board. But still, one priest claims he is being contacted by a demon via text messages. Father Marian Rachel, a priest from Poland, claims that a demon from a failed exorcism is now harassing him. He attempted to perform the exorcism on a teenage girl but unfortunately was unsuccessful. He believed the devil is using this teenage girl to mock his failed attempt via these text messages. One of the messages that he received from the demon was, I quote, "She will not come out of this hell. She's mine. Anyone who prays for her will perish." The priest responded to this that the young girl is clearly still possessed and needs further help. The Catholic Church took this extremely seriously. Although there were some doubters, the majority of the community was extremely concerned about this young girl and her behavior since the possession began. The family of the girl cooperated fully with the church to try and save their sick daughter. They brought her back in for a second exorcism. This one seems to have been successful as far as they're aware. The priest did comment that he received a threatening message after the girl was saved from the demon. They threatened that the two would meet again and he would not be able to save himself next time. The priest, however, remains confident he has rid the world of this demon. He was calm and confident about the whole thing. I don't think I would enjoy texting with the devil. To be honest, I think it's probably the girl playing a little Halloween trick. Coming in at number 3 we have Dark Letter. Back when letter writing was still a thing that was commonly done, it was used by demons to leave messages with the living. Over 300 years ago in Sicily at the convent at Parma di Montechiero, a nun named Sister Maria Crocifissa claimed that she had been possessed by the devil. The story of what happened to her has finally been told, and her letter has finally been translated. The story is told that one morning in 1676, Sister Maria woke up and found herself covered in ink. She had no memory of it, but had spent the night writing letters. Others in the convent had heard disturbances from her room during the night. Some had heard screaming. One said they heard a thud as if she was fainting and hit the floor. Maria had lived at the convent since she was 15 years old. She was devoted to them and had never showed signs of possession or doubt before this incident. The letters explained that Maria was writing on behalf of the devil. He was dictating the words she wrote. The letter said it was Lucifer's plan to possess Maria and turn her against God so she could serve evil. A lot of the letters were coded in hidden messages of symbols and shapes, and they had no way to translate it at the time. Today, some of the letters are still intact, and the Ludum Science Center in Italy attempted to finally decode a portion of the text. The software is reportedly used by intelligence agencies for code breaking. They gave the machine the understanding of Greek, Arabic, the runic alphabet, and Latin. This revealed that the text really was devilish. It described God as a deadweight. It went on to say God could not free mortals from their fate. There is also a reference made within the writing to the river Styx, which in Greek mythology is said to separate the realm of the living from the underworld. The church was trying to disprove that the nun was ever possessed. If anything, decoding the letter proved the opposite. Maria seems to have been very lucky that the possession didn't go further. In at number 2 we have Singapore Doll. We all know that demons have an attachment to creepy dolls. There are so many stories of dolls coming to life and terrorizing families. For one unlucky neighborhood in Singapore, an old doll appeared and started to terrorize those who took it home. One Twitter user told the story to her followers as a warning. The doll first appeared leaning against a tree on a busy residential street. The doll was small and looked like an antique. Her arms were bound to her body with string, and she had a cloth across her eyes with Arabic text written across it. The girl brought the doll home and unbound her while also removing her blindfold. She said not long after bringing the doll home, she noticed that it would move around the home when left alone. She also said that she would hear it talking to itself when she left the room. It was clear to her that the doll was possessed. It soon made sense why it was bound when she found it. Although she did not know the doll's backstory, it seems the previous owner has a similar experience. She threw the doll away hoping to stop the demon from being in her home. However, when she returned, the doll was back home. It knew how to return to her home when it was refusing to leave. She decided to try and bind the doll as she found it. She drove far away from her home and left the doll. Seems that the doll had been continuing this cycle. When you find and untie the doll, the demon and curse transfers to you. The owner saw someone post about finding the doll after she had left it. She saw that it had been untied and posted, "We bind it for a reason, stupid people, unbind it. It looks unhappy. Good luck to whoever did it." Her account has since been deleted, so she couldn't be tracked down for questions or for them to attempt to return the doll. The doll's current location is unknown, but its existence is now well known in the area. There have been discussions and crimes happening in the locations where the doll has been seen. Crimes that have never happened in these areas. The doll seems to communicate with other demons while alone and then whispers to its new owner when given the chance. Some suggested the doll be burned or crushed, but it is unclear if this would work. Surely someone has already tried this at some point. And finally, in at number 1 we have imaginary friend. Sometimes children have imaginary friends and we don't think anything of it, but what if their friend isn't so imaginary? One little girl from Texas named Madison had many imaginary friends when she was younger. All of her imaginary friends came as a pair. When she was 3 years old, she started to talk about a new friend. Her mother, Kelly, found this strange as this friend came around by themselves. Her new friend was called Kellum. She described him as a man around the age of 40. She said she saw him as a father figure. She started to spend a lot of her time playing with him rather than her other imaginary friends. She would build her blocks into a tower and knock them over as it made him laugh. The mother was keeping an eye on her with this latest friend but was not concerned until she started to sing an old song. At the time she didn't know how old the song was. Madison would sing the song all of the time. Her mother asked the nanny where the song is from, thinking she taught her it. She wanted to sing it with her to develop her language skills, but the nanny had never heard the song before. She had no idea where it was from. They looked into it everywhere until they finally found it online and realized it was an old song. It was released in 1892. No one in their life would be familiar with this song. She asked Madison who taught her the song. She said Kellum taught her. He sings it to his child. This shocked Kelly. This imaginary friend has an imaginary baby and he is teaching her real songs. She could not find an explanation for it. Things quickly began to get worse. Maybe Kellum had been watching Kelly figuring out he is more than an imaginary imaginary friend, but maybe he was an entity communicating with her daughter. One night, Madison woke up screaming. When she was older, she told the story that Kellen was grabbing onto her arm, pulling on her. He was getting angry and frustrated that she did not want to stay up and play. She kicked him away and tried to flee the room. She was screaming as she tried to climb the baby gate. Kelly was woken up by the screaming and ran and grabbed Madison as she cried for help. Kelly looked back to the room where the curtains were blowing like there was a great wind in the room, but the windows were all closed. They fled their home. Safely relocated at their friend's home, Kelly called her stepfather, who was a pastor. He did not believe in demons, and if she had come to him sooner, the community might have labeled her a sinner for inviting this entity into her home, but she was desperate. Her stepfather told her to stay away from the home till he was done. He called her the next morning saying it was safe to return. When she got home, holy oil had been used all over the house to protect them. They both said it felt peaceful when they re-entered their home. Madison never saw any of her imaginary friends again. Now she is older and able to reflect on it. She feels the demon was talking to her, telling her stories and attempting to get her to behave badly.
From a relationship that wasn't as nice behind closed doors to some of our favorite cases potentially being fake, here are the top 5 terrifying secrets Ed and Lorraine Warren tried to hide from us, part 2. Number 5 on this list is the relationship. As we'll look at a bit later in this video, Ed and Lorraine's relationship might not have been all it was cracked up to be. The couple that inspired The Conjuring have often been talked about as being one of the greatest married couples ever. In the movie The Conjuring, the pair very clearly have each other's back, and it's clear that there's a deep foundation of love between them. Or at least that's how the movie likes to show it. Real life may have been a lot different. Judith Penny was someone who would have had access to the Warrens' relationship and would have been able to see it behind closed doors. We'll get into why that is the case later and explain who Judith Penny is, but for now, just take my word for it. Apparently, she has come out and said that the Warrens' beautifully loving relationship that we saw on screen is all a bunch of baloney. In truth, Ed was extremely violent and toxic to Lorraine. This toxicity would manifest itself in many different forms. Oftentimes, it would come out in harsh, verbal abuse that felt as if it was coming right from thin air, totally unprovoked by Lorraine. However, occasionally this would manifest into physical abuse. Judith has come out and said that one particularly bad evening she saw Ed backhand Lorraine across the face with all his might, and apparently she lost consciousness. Now, Lorraine wouldn't just sit there and take the abuse either, she would fire her own shots as well. Judith thought that some evenings one of them wouldn't even be waking up the next morning based on how much they were fighting and how intense it would get. This has all the telltale signs of a horribly toxic relationship. The pair were just very good at hiding it. Number 4 on this list is the Amityville horror story. I feel like you've heard this story before, guys. Arguably the most famous of all the Ed and Lorraine Warren cases, this singular case launched the pair onto the main stage as being some of the biggest demonologists and paranormal investigators on the planet. Therefore, it was incredibly important to their image and their brand that this story was believed by the public. Fact of the matter is, though, they made the entire thing up. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was the spark behind this entire story. In 1974, Ronald gunned down his entire family in that home for seemingly no reason. He was later sentenced to life in prison for his crimes and died behind bars at age 69. These murders were brutal, though, and were heard nationwide. That's why when the next family to move in claimed the house was haunted, it actually got a ton of attention. The family said that slime would appear all over the place with no apparent origin. Things would swing open and objects would fly around the room. The house itself could simply not warm up and would stay incredibly cold for weeks on end. The media got wind of this, and so did Ed and Lorraine. They went into this place and went on to have their most successful case ever, ultimately concluding that the house is in fact haunted. However, this just simply was never true. The family's lawyer later came out and said that they collectively made up this story together and thought it would get a lot of traction over a few bottles of wine. The Warrens' initial success literally started by a few drunk people deciding they were going to pull a trick on everyone. Even though this news came out, the Warrens have always held strong onto the fact that the house was in fact haunted. Number 3 on this list is Judith Penny. Ed and Lorraine Warren were married right up until Ed died back in 2006. The couple had been together for a long time and shared quite the life together. I mean, think about all the crazy things that they did. I highly doubt that many people can say that they stopped ghosts around the world and became famous together. While they were at the height of their success, they looked like a power couple. A real duo that you wouldn't want to trifle with. Ed and Lorraine Warren together taking on the world one ghost or possession at a time. Well, during all of that, although it looked like it was just the two of them, there was actually a third. Judith Penny has come forward and said in a sworn statement that she had a relationship with Ed Warren for 4 whole decades. 4 decades where they were having an intimate relationship that the world had no idea about. Apparently, Judith moved into the Warren household when she was 15 years old back in 1963. Ed, who was in his mid-30s at the time, would sleep with her regularly, and Lorraine Warren was well aware of the entire thing. I mean, she obviously was, considering Judith literally lived with the pair in their own house. In fact, before Ed's big career of being a demonologist took off, it said that he would drive Judith's bus to school. How freaking creepy and gross is that, guys? Literally her school bus driver, but also her lover while she's 15 years old. This relationship apparently went on until 2003, 3 years before Ed finally passed away. Obviously, the Warrens didn't want any of this getting out to anyone and kept it very hush-hush. She even had to have when she became pregnant with Ed's child, and that was kept under wraps. What we thought was this power duo was actually a sick and twisted trio that we knew nothing about. The Warren family, before Lorraine died, came out and said that they had no knowledge of the alleged conduct. Number 2 on this list is the Lady in White. The Lady in White was a ghost that was said to haunt the Union Cemetery in Connecticut. This was another one of the Warrens' most famous cases and gained a ton of notoriety. Well, sorry to burst your bubble, guys, but it's fake. Let's roll a clip of what is supposed to be evidence of the Lady in White. So first off, where the hell is the ghost there, and how on earth did this qualify as proof? Like, frankly, I hardly see anything at all, but even if I did, guess who's behind it? Judith. Yeah, the girl that Ed had an illegal relationship with was the Lady in White. Literally dressed up in a sheet, and the pair took some grainy pictures and videos together and claimed it was evidence. Just another secret that the Warrens tried to hide, but eventually it's bubbled to the surface. And finally, number 1 on this list is the smoke and the mirrors. We've already talked about the Amityville Horror House and the Lady in White here, and about how they're all fake. Well, guess what, folks? I hate to do this to you, but they ain't the only ones. Everything the Warrens did was just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. This mural haunting saw other experts come in and look at the space. Nothing was wrong with it. Some of the exorcisms they performed, those people weren't really possessed by the devil. They were mentally ill people that the Warrens were preying on. The whole story about how they cured someone of being a werewolf, like, that doesn't even make any sense. Smoke and mirrors. That's what the Warrens' career was. Now, that's not to say that they didn't inadvertently stumble upon something paranormal every now and again. I mean, if you believe in that sort of stuff, then they must have, based on how active they were in the community. But basically, a lot of our favorite stories that rocketed them to the top of the demonology community are completely fraudulent. I guess it's not the worst thing in the world to know that we aren't living among as many ghosts as the pair claimed that we were.
Now, Ed and Lorraine Warren were mighty demonologists, but for them, there were some cases even they couldn't solve. This is top 5 scary paranormal investigations Ed and Lorraine Warren couldn't solve. Let me know down below in the comments which of these hauntings has got you up tonight. Let's dive on in. Number 5. The Borley Rectory. The Borley Rectory is an old London estate that has the unique distinction of being considered the most haunted building in the United Kingdom. No big deal or anything.
Almost immediately after its constructions, the stories of hauntings started to come out. A local legend says that in the 12th century, a priest and a nun had an affair, and when they were discovered, the nun was bricked up and left to rot in the nearby church. And since then, there's been all manner of legend about her spirit roaming, seemingly in the halls of the rectory. The film The Nun could possibly be based on this. In 1900, the 4 daughters of the estate owner all said they saw a nun wandering around the estate at night. When they tried to speak to her, they got no response. The family had repeatedly claimed they'd seen this nun around their property, and at one occasion, what they thought was the spectral apparition of a horse-drawn carriage with a headless rider. From there on, there was constant reportings of bizarre sounds, strange shadows. In 1927, the original family owning the estate had all passed, and a new family moved in and immediately started experiencing hauntings all the same. The new family, the Smiths, discovered a human skull in the cupboard in a brown bag shortly after unpacking. They reported poltergeist behavior like unexplained footsteps, lights flickering around them, and the same sightings of headless specters. After only 2 years, the Smith family left the rectory, unable to deal with the hauntings present. The next family, the Foysters, experienced, well, wouldn't you know it, all the same things. Objects flying around their home, and on one occasion, claimed that their daughter was attacked by something horrible. They swiftly moved out as well, and the last owner of the rectory would be Captain Gregson, who accidentally lit the estate ablaze while unpacking, knocking over a lantern. Although an insurance report claims that they think the fire was started intentionally, perhaps in a desperate attempt to cast away whatever evil remains in the Borley Rectory, or maybe he unleashed it onto the world. Now my friends, if you want to hear more scary stories about haunted houses and just about everything else under the sun, we're the place to be. Subscribe and keep on creeping on. Number 4. Roland Doe. Now the story of Roland Doe is fairly notable as far as famous exorcisms go, mainly because Roland Doe's case served as the inspiration for the legendary horror film The Exorcist. Roland Doe, a name for the anonymous boy, lived a quiet life in Maryland. He was the family's only son and didn't have much in the way of friends while growing up, save for his Aunt Harriet, a spiritualist and lover of the occult. When Roland was young, she gifted him a Ouija board and taught him how to use it. Now in 1949, dear old Aunt Harriet would pass away, devastating Roland and the family. After her passing, the family started to experience strange, inexplicable occurrences around the home. Scratching would come from inside the walls, water would be leaking out of all the pipes, and curiously, Roland's bed would be moved around in the middle of the night. Confused, the family sought out the experts of everyone they knew, and their local minister suggested they needed the help of an exorcist. Priests came to exorcise the home and Roland, believing that the boy had been possessed by the devil. They strapped him to a mattress to begin, but had to stop when he broke the straps and slashed one of the clergymen with the strap. Red scratches appeared all over his body, reading out the word Louis. The family believed this was a sign they needed to move to St. Louis, where the family had relatives. From there, they were put into contact with a series of priests who would conduct round-the-clock exorcisms on Roland. The days would pass normally, but at night, the battle would begin when Roland would enter a trance-like state, speaking in Latin, gutturally growling, even threatening priests that Satan had taken him. For weeks, the priests toiled tirelessly to exorcise the demon, until eventually there was a miracle breakthrough. The priests called upon the power of St. Michael and told the demon he was coming to battle them. Roland woke the next morning and said he had a vision of Satan and St. Michael on a heavenly battlefield, fighting for control of his soul, and that he knew Satan was gone. From here, Roland lived a happy, healthy, normal life, and his case might have been forgotten if author William Blatty wasn't inspired by the case after reading a story about it in the paper. But without him, we never would have got The Exorcist, so it all worked out, mostly. Number 3. The Crescent Hotel. Now the Crescent Hotel is a beautiful stop if you're ever visiting Arkansas. It's been called the Grand Old Lady of the Ozarks due to its gorgeous old Gothic design and wonderful view of the mountains. What a shame that such a beautiful spot is said to be home to tortured souls unable to move on. During construction of the Crescent Hotel, a worker named Michael plunged from the death, fatally landing in room 218. The room has since been a hotspot for paranormal activity, with bizarre noises and laughter reportedly heard by the guests. But this wouldn't be the only haunting present at the Crescent Hotel. You see, before it found life as a hotel resort and a spa, the Crescent Hotel was run by a charismatic charlatan named Norman Baker, who ran an alternative clinic out of the hotel, claiming the spring waters had restorative powers and could cure any ailments. Of course, Baker didn't even have the slightest medical experience or training and was far closer to a two-bit con man than he was a doctor. Patients would check in and never leave. Baker would promise patients a cure for everything up to cancer, when in reality he was just injecting them with corn silk and water. Baker was arrested for his crimes in 1949, but the souls of those he tormented wouldn't find peace yet. All throughout the hotel, guests report strange noises, scratchings, whisperings, with some going so far as to say they see ghastly figures, floating orbs and such. There's even a notable ghost who wanders the halls. A nurse named Theodora is the hotel's most prominent ghost, who manifests as an old woman flustered out of room 14. She hates mess and discord, and many guests report that they'll discover their belongings have been rearranged if they're staying in her room. There's even sightings of a ghost cat named Morris, who luckily is a benevolent spirit. Guests report hearing purring or feeling a mysterious warm brushing against their legs. I just hope there's meow mix in the afterlife. Number 2. The Winchester House. William Winchester was the heir to the Winchester rifle throne, and married to his wife Sarah, they lived happily. They welcomed a daughter, although tragically she fell ill immediately and passed before her first birthday. Shortly after, William would pass as well, leaving Sarah alone, depressed, and with roughly $20 million kicking around. In 1886, Sarah used the money to move from Connecticut to California and began construction on her legacy, her mansion. It was built for 20 years. She paid workers night and day round the clock, demolishing one improvement to make another. But the house wasn't built like any other house. It seemed random, like it was being built out of a dream. A staircase that goes nowhere, ending at the ceiling. Multiple boarded up rooms. She spent roughly $5 million on the construction of the odd home. But why? Did she just want something to start conversations when dinner guests were over? Well, shortly after her family tragedies, Sarah visited a psychic for advice, who told her she was being cursed by the spirits of all the lives taken by her husband's rifles. That is a lot of angry cowboys. She was told she needed to build a mansion to capture the wandering souls and seal them away from the rest of the world, and she made it her life's mission to accomplish this. She thought that the house's bizarre design would confuse spirits and keep them at bay. I honestly don't know about that. I thought ghosts could float and go through walls. I don't even know if they would care. The house still stands and is a popular tourist spot for fledgling ghost hunters, who believe that her massive ghost trap did work and she's caught spirits, with reportings of mysterious sounds. There are some who even claim that Sarah herself has been trapped in her home, doomed to walk amongst the spirits she worked so hard to capture. Number 1. The Bell Witch. In the 1800s, a farmer named John Bell moved his family to Adams, Tennessee, onto a bountiful 300-acre farm. Bell quickly became a figurehead of the community, respected by many, and becoming a local leader at his town's church. For the Bell family, things were the brightest they've ever been. They were living the dream. But things wouldn't be good for long, and they'd find themselves in a nightmare. By 1817, strange things started to occur around the farmstead. John found a mysterious animal, a mutant hybrid that resembled a grotesque mix between a dog and a rabbit. The Bell children would complain to their father that they would hear strange sounds that sounded like vermin gnawing at all things in their bedrooms, and the children would wake up with scratches all over their bodies. At all hours of the day, everyone in the family would complain that they could hear faint whispering and singing, and that it sounded like an old woman was singing hymns on their wall. Most tragically, the Bells found a mysterious vial of liquid inside their home that no one could understand. Nervous about what it was, John Bell offered a small amount of it to their cat, who passed almost immediately after. For 3 long years, the Bell family was tormented by these strange occurrences, chalking it up to a mysterious entity that would later be known as the Bell Witch, named after the mysterious old humming that they kept hearing. In 1820, John Bell grew extremely ill, quickly descending in health and passing. At his funeral, the mourners complained that all they could hear was the laughing of an old woman, mocking and singing at the late John Bell. The farm was so notable that it even caught the attention of President Andrew Jackson, who in 1819, a year before John Bell's passing, visited it to see if the legends of the witch were true. Allegedly, as soon as his carriage arrived at the property, the horses refused to budge anymore. The animals can always tell.
From the saint of death to wicked water dwellers looking to kidnap you, Here are the top 5 terrifying demons found in South America. Number 5 on this list is La Madremonte. According to myths and legends of Colombia, La Madremonte is a legend in which a woman who wears moss, leaves, and a green hat that conceals her face. She lives in the dense jungle and supposedly bathes in rivers, causing flooding and heavy storms. Madremonte haunts those who steals other people's land and casts plagues on cattle owners who ignore boundaries and take advantage of others. She also dislikes unfaithful spouses, vagabonds, and general mischief makers and punishes them by placing insurmountable obstacles in their path when they walk through the jungle. They eventually fall asleep with exhaustion and do not wake for hours. I think what's especially dangerous about this demon is her ability to control the weather the way that she does. It's said that even if you happen to be walking throughout the jungle or forested areas and you happen to get close to where she lives, then she'll use her powers to change the weather and make it extremely dangerous for you. This has caused some people to die before and wrecked even people's homes. For the most part, she'll target people who have wronged somebody else before, and even though this isn't right, it at least means that you can protect yourself by not wronging somebody else. However, to just be walking and accidentally run into her home and then get swept up in a horrible lightning storm definitely isn't cool. Be very careful of this demon witch in the woods if you happen to be around the area. Number 4 on this list is El Chupacabra. One of the most famous urban legends in the area, El Chupacabra is probably one that you've heard of before. Now, this demonic creature is most commonly associated with Puerto Rico. It has, as time gone on, been spotted more and more frequently in parts of South America though, like Chile. Wikipedia says, the Chupacabra or Chupacabras, literally goatsucker from Spanish, chupa to suck and cabras goats, is a legendary creature in the folklore of parts of the Americas, with its first purported sightings reported in Puerto Rico in 1995. The name comes from the animal's reported vampirism. The Chupacabra is said to attack and drink the blood of livestock, including goats. Physical descriptions of the creature vary, with some describing it as more dog-like, while others describe it as a reptilian and alien-like thing. Some report it as being a heavy creature the size of a small bear with a row of spines reaching from the neck to the base of the tail. Now, after some extensive research on this creature, I couldn't actually find any reported attacks on humans. So it seems that this bloodthirsty villain is truly only interested in animals. That being said, there were some instances where people had seen this creature, tried to stop it, and it looked as if it was preparing to attack them. Like most vicious animals, it's probably most interested in its food, but it's gonna defend itself to the last ounce of its energy if it has to. Therefore, El Chupacabra is truly only super dangerous to farmers of livestock. If you happen to be a farmer of said livestock, then having some sort of mechanism to keep out this vampiric demon lizard is of critical importance, or else it will completely decimate your animals. It's definitely better that you invest in some serious fencing, because trying to stop it by yourself, it could prove very dangerous. Number 3 on this list is the Encantados. The Encantados are a group of multiple demon creatures that reside underwater. They are extremely dangerous and have reportedly been responsible for several human disappearances. The thing about Encantados is that they're very curious about humans, and you may have no idea that you're dealing with one for a long time. Mental Floss says the Encantado is a dolphin, but one with evil powers. Encantado means enchanted one in Portuguese and refers to a special kind of boto, or long-beaked river dolphin native to the Amazon, that can take human form. Encantados are curious about humans and are especially attracted to big, noisy festivals, which they often attend as musicians, staying in human form for years. How can you recognize one? Look under its hat. They always have bald spots that are actually disguised blowholes. Encantados are usually friendly, but they occasionally hypnotize and kidnap young women and take them back to the Encante, their underground city. Sometimes the women escape and return pregnant with an Encantado baby. So they seem really nice and good right up until they decide to kidnap you and take you to their underground city, where any number of things could happen. Most of the people who are taken there never return, and as they said, the ones that do have another passenger coming along for the ride. The origin of Encantados are not 100% confirmed, but it seems that many people think that it was a small village that was cursed to live underwater for a long time. Now they reside there except for the few times that they take the surface disguised as humans to see what we're up to and to take a few of us back to their evil lair. Number 2 on this list is El Cebon. El Cebon, also known as the Whistler, is a demon that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. This is a mistake though, and frankly we need to be talking and educating more about this demon and how dangerous it can be. The Spanish language blog says, according to a legend often told in the rural parts of Venezuela, El Cebon is the last soul of a young man who one day killed his own father in revenge because he murdered his son's girlfriend as he didn't approve of their relationship. After he killed his father, the young man's grandfather took it upon himself to punish him by tying him to a tree and beating him with a whip until he bled. Then he condemned him to carry his father's remains in a sack on his back. As the boy walked away into the plains, his grandfather yelled at him, "You shall not do that to your father, you are damned for all eternity," and then set his rabid dogs after him. It's said that the boy's spirit brings death and destruction to anyone who comes across him. His ghost is described as an extremely tall and skinny man who wears a farming hat and whistles the notes do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. He's very tricky while deceiving his victims. When his whistling is heard up close, he's actually far away, but when he's heard from afar, you better start running because he's actually nearby. So first off, that initial family is freaking messed up, dude. Your dad kills your girlfriend, so then you kill your dad, but then your grandfather beats you, forces you to carry around your dead dad, and then sends dogs after you. Like, what the heck? Aside from the family being absolutely bonkers, this demon is also kinda nuts as well. I get serious Batman Joker vibes from the creepy whistle that he does there to indicate that he's coming to get his victims. The way he kills his victims is said to be very graphic as well, and he won't have you die slowly. It will be a long and drawn out process of torture that will have you begging for death. Nobody really knows how to defend yourself against this demon either. Fighting it one-on-one just simply won't work and you're gonna lose. You just need to pay very close attention to the whistle, and if you do ever hear it, don't second guess anything, just take off and don't look back. Hope that he loses interest in you and moves on to something else. Just a terrifying demon who you need to avoid at all costs. And finally, number 1 on this list is Saint-La-Merte. So Saint-La-Merte is one of the most famous on this list, and I can promise you that you definitely do not want to run into this one. Saint-La-Merte is your typical personification of death in South America. It is a male figure that's dressed in a hooded cloak holding a very sharp and very menacing scythe that is sometimes referred to as Saint Death. Saint Death, or just death if you will, brings one thing alone, and it's not a welcome gift. No, as you would expect, it's death. And this demonic personification of death is said to be pretty inherently evil as well. There are many followers that look up to Saint Death and praise him. The biggest following for him is in Argentina and the country surrounding Argentina. Saint Death is said to reward his followers by helping them on their evil ventures. Let's say that you're a dangerous murderer, but you're also a strong supporter of Saint Death. Well, if Saint Death likes you, then he'll use his powers that he has to have you evade the law or even assist you in killing people. He grants numerous requests that are all connected to crime and violence and is basically the guardian angel for the evil criminals of the world. Saint-La-Merte also acknowledges those who do not devote a part of their lives to him, and it's not the type of acknowledgement that you'd want. He will often kill those who disrespect him and don't support him. This is part of the reason why he has such a strong and stable following, and many people are constantly praising him and his abilities. If you ever see this demon confront you, then there's most likely nothing you can do at all. That will be the last thing that you ever see and your last moment ever spent on Earth.
One of the most terrifying things in this world are demons, and they roam all over the world. The most well-known and the scariest demons are found in Europe. In this video, we'll be counting down the top 5 terrifying demons found in Europe. Coming in at number 5, we have Wolpertinger. The Wolpertinger can be found in Germany and is a mysterious creature that roams the alpine forests of Bavaria. This odd-looking creature isn't particularly large or vicious, but can be incredibly scary due to the fact it is made up of different body parts of various animals. It has the head of a rabbit, the body of a squirrel, the legs of a pheasant, and has antlers, fangs, and wings. Legend has it that if you are brave enough to try and lure the Wolpertinger in to see it for yourself, you need to bring salt with you and a trap. It is said that if you sprinkle salt on its tail, you can supposedly catch it. Also, if you prop open a sack with a spade and light a candle inside, the demon will be attracted to the light, and once he's inside the sack, you remove the spade and trap him. But be very careful, because if they feel threatened, they can attack, and they are extremely quick. The creepiest thing about this demon is that some people have hunted down various woodland creatures to create their own stuffed Wolpertingers to keep, sell them to tourists, or give them to hotels or inns to put on display for all to see. So if you're planning a trip to Germany, I would definitely steer clear of the forest in Bavaria. You wouldn't want to come into contact with this demon creature. In at number 4, we have Tatzelworm. The Tatzelworm is a huge man-sized worm or snake with a feline face and a reptile tail that usually lives underground in the Eastern Alps in Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Italy, Bavaria, and Austria. The only time you may get attacked by this hideous creature is if you disturb it or threaten it while it's burrowed. It is believed that this demonic creature is extremely venomous and can attack you with its poisonous breath, and tends to make a high-pitched hissing sound when attacking their prey. So if you ever hear that nail on a chalkboard-like sound, I suggest running the other way. The name Tatzelworm isn't traditionally used in Switzerland. They usually refer to this demon as Stollenworm, or the dragon of the mine tunnels. The Stollenworm may also be interpreted to mean a serpent with short, thick feet. An early description of dragon sightings in Switzerland was seen by Johann Jacob Wagner as early as 1680, and then illustrated further by Johann Jacob Schuster in 1723 and referred to as Schuster's dragons. The cat-headed serpent with black-grey body and no legs was said to be encountered by Johann and Thomas Tinner at a place locally known as Hauwellen on the mountain of Frumsen in the barony of Alsace, Switzerland. It was alleged to measure 7 feet or more in length. Residents in the neighborhood were complaining that their cows' udders were being mysteriously sucked on, but the incident stopped after this creature was killed. Another account of this demon was described as a 4-legged cat-faced mountain dragon by Andreas Raudner as something he encounters in 1660 on Mount Wangersberg in Sargansenland, and when it reared up on its hind legs, it became as tall as a man with boar-like bristles running down its back. A 70-year-old man named Johannes Egerton came into contact with this beast and said when it exhaled its breath, the man said he was overcome with dizziness and a massive headache. The naturalist Carl Wilhelm wrote in his book History of Dragons of the Alps in 1887 that these creatures have died out by now, but to this day the Tatzelworm phantom legend lives on, and many people still believe these demons remain. In at number 3, we have Black Shuck. The Black Shuck may be the most terrifying of them all, and definitely the deadliest. It's a huge black dog with evil red or green eyes that roams around the countryside of East Anglia. If you ever come in contact with this demon creature, you will most likely die or at least become very ill. Even just looking in the Black Shuck's eyes directly means certain death. The Black Shuck is referred by many as an omen of death if ever seen or came in contact with. The name Shuck derives from the Old English word skuka, which translates as devil, fiend, and to terrify. In Littleport, Cambridgeshire, it's home to 2 different legends of black dogs, which many believe are linked to the Black Shuck. One account refers to the story of a huge black dog that haunts the area after being killed rescuing a local girl from a lustful friar in pre-Reformation times, while the other story tells of a black dog that haunts the A10 road after its owner drowned in the nearby River Great Ouse in the 1800s. In May 2014, a large dog was excavated at Leiston Abbey by Dig Ventures, and many believe it was the remains of a Black Shuck. Dig Ventures came out and said they don't believe the remains were from the Black Shuck, stating it was only 2 feet tall and was around the size of a mastiff. Carbon dating of the bones indicated the dog was said to be from around the 16 or 1700s. Many people have reported sightings of the Black Shuck, and even to this day locals believe this demon is still roaming around England. One local woman said she had seen the creature one summer morning in the 1950s when she returned home from dance near Cromer. A Suffolk man said he had seen the dog one evening on the marshes near Felixstowe, and another account of a woman who was cycling during the 1930s. One winter night, the woman was riding her bike home after making a delivery when she was followed by a huge dog, and no matter how fast she pedaled, it seemed to effortlessly keep up to her before suddenly vanishing into thin air. The Black Black Shook has also been seen many times in pop culture, like in the hit TV show Teen Wolf, the 2019 movie Annabelle Comes Home, the 2020 video game Assassin's Creed, and even referred to in the 1999 novel Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. In at number 2 we have Basilisk. The Basilisk is an extremely dangerous being. It is a legendary reptile that is referred to as a Serpent King, who can cause death with a single glance and is believed to be able to breathe fire. This snake-like being is not very big but is highly venomous and can kill in an instant and leaves a wide trail of venom behind. The Basilisk is quite different from a normal looking snake and is named King because it is seen to have a crown-shaped crest on its head. One of the earliest accounts of the demon comes from Pliny the Elder's Natural History, written in roughly 79 AD, where it's described as a monstrous cow-like creature and all who beholds its eyes fall dead upon the spot. The only thing that the Basilisk fears is a weasel. It is the only animal that can face and attack the demon snake, and apparently the weasel's urine is the Basilisk's kryptonite. It can also be killed with the crowing of a rooster, and many travellers would, and some still do, carry a rooster when they venture into areas where it was said that the Basilisk lives. Some people have speculated that accounts and descriptions of cobras may have given rise to the legend of the Basilisk demon. Cobras can maintain an upright posture and are often killed by mongooses, and the king cobra have a crown-like symbol on its head. Several species of spitting cobras have the ability to spit their venom from a distance, often in their prey's eyes, so they have many similarities to the basilisk. So if you're ever in southern Europe, I would beware of this monstrous snake demon. And finally, in at number 1 we have Balbus. This demon tends to reside in areas of Lithuania and is basically the boogeyman on steroids. It is a dark demon who will come and kidnap misbehave. The Balbus has piercing red eyes, long thin arms, wrinkling fingers, and the most terrifying face. This demon creature stands almost 7 feet tall and their body appears like a large skeleton covered in black leathery skin. They also have extremely sharp claws and usually pounce on their victims from above. Sometimes they use two-handed weapons, but still have the ability to fight off their opponents with their claws, teeth, and horns. This demon likes to hide under carpets or inside dark crevices of your house before appearing and snatching the child. The Balbus is devious, mysterious, and will stop at nothing to make sure they are victorious in everything they do. Their more subtle sadism and stealth sets them apart from every demon on this list, and they like to capture their targets for later torture as opposed to immediate bloodshed. In many places like Italy and the Eastern Mediterranean, the Balbus is portrayed as a tall man wearing a heavy black coat with a black hood or hat which hides its face. Sometimes parents would loudly knock under the table, pretending that someone is knocking at the door to make their children behave. It is also featured in a popular Italian nursery rhyme saying, "Who do I give this child to? I will give him to Balbus for a whole year." This tactic is used by many parents throughout Europe to make their children who are misbehaving fearful of getting the wrath of Balbus and in turn making them behave better. Many believe that the popular boogeyman was actually inspired by this demon by the fact that he likes to kidnap during the night, hide in darkness, and frightening children into good behaviour. The boogeyman is a term used to instill fear in children, and the Balbus is the most terrifying demon of them all. Demons can be found all throughout history and all over the world. Many are mythical, but many actually exist, and the most terrifying demons can be found in many places throughout Europe. We'll be counting down the top 5 terrifying demons found in Europe Part 2. Coming in at number 5 we have Rubisol. Rubisol or Rubisol is a folklore mountain spirit of the Giant Mountains, a mountain range along the border between the historical lands of Bohemia and Silesia. This demon is the subject of many different legends and fairy tales throughout German folklore. Legend has it that Rubisol is a giant gnome or mountain spirit. With good people he can be friendly, teaches them about medicine and gives presents, but if someone disobeys or disrespects him, his revenge is severe and can be deadly. He sometimes plays the role of a trickster in folk tales. The origin story of Rubisol comes from pagan times, and he is known as a fantastic lord of weather of the mountains and is similar to the Wild Hunt, which are a group that roam the sky during storms and is an omen of disaster. This demon has the ability to change the weather drastically. He can send rain, lightning, thunder, and snow from the mountain to the lands below. Rubisol takes the appearance of a monk in a grey frock, holds a string instrument in his hand, which is known as the storm harp, and walks so heavily that the earth shakes around him. Others believe the demon inhabits that of a large bear and wolves to blend in with the other animals on the mountains. In the area surrounding his mountain there is a large botanical garden named after the demon, named Rubisol's Garden. In the Czech Republic, local fairy tales say that Rubisol gives sourdough to people and invented traditional regional soup named kyselo. There is also a mountain named Kotel, which means cauldron. When fog rises from the valley at the bottom of the Kotel, people say that's when Rubisol is cooking the kyselo soup. To this day, this demon's legend lives on. Coming in at number 4 we have Addanc. Addanc or Addanc is a demon originating from British, Welsh and Celtic mythology. It's said to look like a beaver, crocodile or dwarf-like demon and are about 7 feet long and weigh around 250 pounds. They prey upon those who are foolish enough to enter the lake it lives in. This demon once lived in Llyn Bafog or in Llyn Lion Lake, and it can be lured out of the water by a woman, and once this happens, Addanc becomes powerless. There are some stories of this demon being destroyed. One tells of a man dragging the beast out of the water to slay it, another says it was lured out of the water, where it eventually fell asleep and was bound in chains and slayed, but many believe this demon still roams in the lakes of Europe. The Addanc is a solitary predator that builds dams to create smaller lakes, but still a part of the larger lake it lives in. Once they find the right place for a habitat, it's their territory and theirs only. Anything that comes near the lake or the adjoining rivers becomes this demon's prey. The Addanc hunts its prey by floating just under the surface of the water, waiting for its next meal to approach, and when it does, they attack with a bone-crushing bite. And once they have their prey in their mouth, the Addanc then drags them under the water and goes in for the kill. They wait for the prey at their most vulnerable and takes advantage of that. Like a beaver den, the Addanc's lair can only be accessed from below the water's surface, but is truly hideous sight because they use the remains of its victims for decoration of their habitat, and the stench of decay lingers all around the demon's lair. According to many historical writings between 1382 and 1410, it describes the mass destruction of Addanc and how he can cause massive flooding, and one time in particular, the floods caused all the original inhabitants of Britain except for Dwyfyn and Dwyfach, who went on to find a new race of Britons. This demon is recognized by many throughout Europe and the world and is mentioned in many different books and TV shows. In at number 3 we have Picolus. Picolus is a demon from the ancient inhabitants of Prussia, described as an angry and evil spirit, with the appetite for human blood. Picolus and Patalo were gods in the pagan Prussian mythology worshipped by the old Prussians. Most researchers believe both these gods were the same person, and were in charge of the underworld and the dead. This demon was first mentioned in 1418 by Bishop of Warmia in a letter to the Pope and chronicler Simon Grunau. In a letter to the Pope and chronicler Simon Grunau, who provided more details about Picolus. According to Simon, Picolus was one of the 3 gods portrayed on the flag and coat of arms of King Wideruto, and worshipped in the temple of Ricciotto. He appears to look like an old man with a white beard and white headdress. He was scary and ruthless god of the dead. This demon would haunt and taunt the living if they disobeyed the pagan priests or buried the dead without proper sacrifices to the gods. Many other medieval writers believe in Simon's descriptions of the demon. In another writing, the Sadovian books, it mentioned 2 beings, Pekals, the god of hell and darkness, and Pekals, airborne spirit or devil. The same bear is also found in the church decrees of 1530. Many believe these 2 demons mentioned are just extended descriptions of Picolus. Caspar Heinenberger and later authors attempted to reconcile the accounts provided by Simon Grunau and the Sadovian book. In the 17th century, Christoph Harknock and Matthias Praetorius testified that people still believe in this demon, and many believe Picolus is in fact the devil. In at number 2 we have Bifrons. Bifrons is from the Earl of Dynastan, with 6 legions of demons under his command. He teaches sciences and arts and has knowledge of gems, woods and herbs. This demon has the ability to change corpses from their original grave into other places, sometimes putting magic lights on the graves that appear like candles. He first appeared as a monster but then changed his shape into that of a man to blend in with earthly people. Bifrons was originally the Roman god Janus and is often referred to as so. In ancient Roman religion and myth, Janus is the god of beginnings and transitions, also of gates, doors, passages, endings and time. He is also well versed in astrology and planetary influences, as well as geometry, herbology, mineralogy and botany. He is usually depicted as having a monstrous appearance along with 2 faces, due to his ability to look into the future and the past. The Romans named the month of January in his honor. Janus presided over the beginning and ending of conflict, and hence war and peace. The doors of his temple were open in a time of war and closed to mark the peace. As a god of transitions, he has functions pertaining to birth, journeys and exchange. Janus had a major presence in religious ceremonies throughout the years and was ritually invoked at the beginning of each one and heavily honored on many different occasions. Bifrons is mainly in charge of moving bodies from one grave to another, while hellish demon Muma takes over the souls. Accordingly, Bifrons has 26 legions of Dynastan's army under his command and is the 46th spirit of the 72 Solomon imprisoned in a brass vessel. And finally in at number 1 we have Krampus. One of the most popular demons coming from Europe is Krampus. He is a horned half-goat, half-man beast who terrorizes children throughout the Christmas season who have misbehaved. Assisting St. Nicholas, the pair visit the children on the night of December 25th each year, and St. Nick rewards the well-behaved children who have been good all year with gifts, while the badly behaved ones on the naughty list get a visit from Krampus and receive punishment from him. The origin of this demon is not directly known, but many believe this demon goes back centuries and originated in Germany, and since 1984 this demon has become known globally. Since the 19th century, during the Christmas season, many Europeans will exchange greeting cards featuring the Krampus demon. The feast of St. Nicholas is celebrated in parts on Europe on December 6th, and on the evening of December 5th is known as Krampus Night, where the wicked hairy devil appears on the streets, where he visits homes and businesses, wreaking havoc on unsuspecting humans. Many people believe Krampus has multiple appearances, but the most common is that he is hairy with black or brown fur, has hooves and the horns of a goat, as well as long pointed tongue hanging out and sharp fangs. There are festivals all throughout Europe held to celebrate Krampus, while many dress up in elaborate horrifying costumes that resemble this demon. In the aftermath of the 1932 election in Austria, the Krampus tradition was prohibited by the Dollfuss regime and the Christian Social Party. In the 1950s, the government distributed pamphlets titled "Krampus is an Evil Man." Towards the end of the century, Krampus' popularity rose, and the festivals began and continue to this day. Young men dress up in Krampus costumes and roam the streets, frightening children with rusty chains and bells. Many of these festivals take place in Austria, Romania, Bavaria, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, and Croatia, just to name a few. We've all heard about Santa, and kids are constantly told if they have bad behavior they will get coal for Christmas, but many don't realize that this has come from the legend of Krampus. This demon has become a global figure and is depicted in many horror films and has become a part of American pop culture.
How many reports, how many sightings, how many stories does it take before we start truly asking ourselves, could this be true? The stories that we're going to talk about today made it on this list because I actually started asking myself that very question. What is good, my friends? My name is Nicholas Playlog, and in this video we're going to be looking at the top 5 scary demons that might be real. Let's get into it. Number 5 on this list is the Jersey Devil, and no, I'm not referencing the hockey team, the New Jersey Devils. I'm actually talking about the winged beast that soars the skies in that area. The Jersey Devil is described as being a massive kangaroo-like creature with hooves as feet, a goat's head, and demon wings. It also has a tail that is very similar to that of the devil. It is very fast and can be distinguished by its extremely loud pterodactyl-like scream. The whole legend of the Jersey Devil has some old origins. The story begins in the 17th century when a mother, who some claim to be a witch, was having her 13th child. In some versions of the story, she cursed this child since she didn't want a 13th kid. But in others, it just contracted the abilities that it has today because she was a witch and had a pact with the devil. One thing that remains consistent though is that she had this child and then after it was born, transformed into the creature that I just described and flew out of the home and into some nearby woods. This devil has lived in the woods of Jersey ever since, and it's been sighted quite a few times over the years. Many livestock deaths have been linked to the Jersey Devil, with the carcasses of these animals being completely mauled in an unknown way. One story depicts how somebody in the 1800s fired a cannonball at this creature and it literally had no effect at all. In January of 1909, the legend reached a new height when there was a wave of sightings from various different people all in the same region. It got so big in the media that the Philadelphia Zoo even offered a reward of $10,000, which when I used an inflation calculator would have been worth $300,000 today. Now this could simply be a manifestation of people's imaginations, but with the incredible number of stories related to this demon, with the fact that a zoo was willing to fork over a small fortune for this thing, I actually think that it might be real. Number 4 on this list is the Dover Demon. The Dover Demon is an urban legend that is based out of Dover, Massachusetts, and has gained a lot of traction throughout the years. Back in 1977, the Dover Demon had its first sighting by a 17-year-old named William Bartlett. William claimed that he saw this strange creature when he was driving home on April 21st. And we described this creature as having super large eyes, long tendril-like fingers, a massive head, and spindly limbs. He said that he saw this strange demon sitting on top of a broken stone wall staring down at him. When he reported it to the police, he had to make a drawing of the creature, and after looking at it, I personally got some very serious amphibian vibes. What's super interesting about this story though is that the next night, on April 22nd, somebody else reported seeing this creature as well. This was a 15-year-old named John Baxter, and he said that he saw the creature on Miller Road in the same town. And then what gets even crazier is that the following day, another 15-year-old named Abby Brabham said that she saw this being on Springdale Avenue in the same town. The police made all of them draw pictures of this creature, and all of them were eerily similar to each other. Now since then there hasn't been much rumblings about the Dover demon, so let's just break this down a little bit. We have a weird amphibian looking creature that had reportedly only been seen in a 3-day time frame. Now to me, this screams one of two things. Number one, it's a few teenagers, they're pulling off a prank on the town, they want to have a little fun. Okay, that's possible. Or number two, maybe it's aliens. An alien comes to Earth, investigates a little bit, and then after investigating, leaves and has never been seen again. Personally, aliens are something that I can actually get behind, and the narrative to me in this instance would actually make a lot of sense. Again guys, it could totally be a bunch of teenagers making something up about a demon, or maybe it could be aliens. Let me know in the comments guys, who you got, teenagers or aliens? What's your money on? Number 3 on this list is the New Hampshire Woods Devil. Now first thing about this creature is that it may not be a singular being, but actually an entire species in itself. The Woods Devil, or devils, are found in the deep forests of New Hampshire. These are very sizable creatures ranging from roughly 7 to 9 feet in height and are also very hairy. Now when I was first reading this, I'm gonna be completely honest, I was like, alright, 7 to 9 feet, super hairy, well that's just a bear, nothing demonic here. But where they differ from bears is just how thin they are for their height. They're said to be rather lanky creatures with really long fingers and fingernails. Sightings of these beasts have been going on for quite a while as well, with reports going back almost 100 years all the way to the 1930s. Now for a long period of time, people thought that they were dealing with Bigfoot in regards to these creatures. However, it is now believed that they are either a descendant of Bigfoot or a subspecies. Their hair is really notable as well because it's actually gray. This allows them to blend into their environment extremely well and camouflage themselves from predators or hunters. This also works extremely well with their temperament because it's believed that these wood devils are pretty calm creatures. People have reported running into them before, but I couldn't find any explicit reports of these beings attacking humans or hunting humans down like some other demons. In fact, for the most part, people have said that they've watched these creatures hide from them by camouflaging themselves up against a tree or simply just running away entirely. It feels like these wood devils actually have a decent amount of validity to them based on the amount of sightings that have happened over the years. Now this entry made it into the video because they are literally called the wood devils, but personally I think that we need to change that. How do we know that these timid creatures aren't just another animal that we've discovered in the woods? Why have we connected them to the demon world? Personally, I'm super interested to see how the story of these wood devils develop as more sightings and more information comes to light. Number 2 on this list is Kuchisake Onna. Kuchisake Onna is a Japanese legend that depicts a girl who is rather beautiful but has deep slits on the sides of her mouth. Her appearance is actually very similar to that of the Joker in Batman, with cuts on either side. The reason that I'm saying that she might be real is just how deeply rooted she is in Japanese culture, with practically the whole country aware and likely afraid of Kuchisake Onna. The legend of this demon has been told over centuries and is always the same story. This girl will appear with a face mask on or some other thing that's covering her mouth. She will then ask you, "Do you think I'm beautiful?" Most of the time the person being asked would respond with a resounding yes. She would then pull off the mask and ask the question again. Any hesitation, any wavering on your part not to once again repeat that resounding yes would result in her slitting your mouth open like hers and then killing you on the spot. If you search her up on the internet, there are hundreds of stories of sightings, theories on how to survive her, just general explanations talking about her origins. It's for this reason that I honestly think that she might be real, or at least a portion of the story has to be. This level of mass hysteria, it doesn't come from thin air. Could I believe that maybe a woman who had scars on her face or her mouth killed somebody, and then that story got exaggerated to the point that we have it today? Maybe. But the point that I'm trying to make is that she might just be real based on the amount of lore that surrounds her. Obviously, we can't be sure, but if a woman ever approaches you asking if she's pretty, the answer, it's always yes. Number 1 on this list is Vampire Mercy Brown. Vampire Mercy Brown is a 100% true story that occurred in the later 1800s about a demonic vampire. George Brown was a family man. He had a wife, a few kids. Sadly, George's entire family started to drop in a matter of months. First, it started with his wife Mary, then a few months later his daughter Olive, then his daughter Mercy, and then his teenage son Edwin. What would happen is they would just become immediately frail and sick and then die, and nobody could explain why this was happening. The townsfolk though started to believe that something supernatural was afoot here and decided that they were going to go and check the bodies of these dead people in their graves. When they did, they discovered something that really shook them to their core. George's one daughter Mercy had been underground at this point for roughly 2.5 to 3 months. When they opened up her grave though, she didn't look like she'd been there for more than a day. Her hair looked luscious, her fingernails had grown, she looked like she had fresh blood flowing through her veins. This discovery confirmed what the townsfolk had suspected though. They believed that George's family was being targeted by a demonic vampire and were slowly being killed off by it. When they discovered Mercy in the state that she was, it was clear that she had been turned and now she was operating as a vampire and waking up at night to feast on the blood of the living. They quickly took Mercy and cut open her chest and burned her heart so that her demon spirit was dead for good and gone from the world of the living. However, they never were able to find the initial vampire that was causing this problem in the first place. The discovery of her body as it was is all completely true as well, with no one being able to have a proper explanation for how she could possibly be kept in that condition. The only logical answer was that Mercy Brown was an undead vampire, and if the townsfolk wanted to stay alive, they had to put her to rest for good. A demon is a supernatural being that is typically associated with evil and worshipping the devil, and possessing the living is a pretty common way to go about worshipping said devil. Let's take a look at top 5 real demons who have done exactly that. Number 5 on this list is Father Urbain Grandier. Father Urbain Grandier was born in 1590 in France and lived until 1634. He became a priest in the town of Loudun in 1617 and was a priest right up until he was burned at the stake in 1634. That's right guys, Father Urbain Grandier's story takes an ugly turn when he's linked to making some serious deals with the devil. Urbain had some negative rumors start to circulate around him in 1629 when he was being accused of sleeping around with a lot of women. It was even thought that he was the father to a son of a married woman, however that was never 100% proven. The slander surrounding his name reached an all-time high when in 1632 allegations of demonic possession started to form. A group of nuns began having very strange and vivid dreams with Urbain appearing in them. They also started acting very funny and not feeling like themselves. It all started with Mother Superior Jeanne d'Agnes. It's written that, unfortunately for the tortured nun, no amount of penance kept her dreams at bay, and soon the other nuns followed in her footsteps. This plague of nightmares swept its way through all of these nuns, and they all reported having Urbain in their dreams. The nuns started to fling accusations at Father Urbain Grandier and said that he'd gotten a demon to possess them. The demon that most people link to this possession is Asmodeus, who's a prince of demons, a demon that represents lust. That being said, a bunch of other demons were tied to this possession as well. Zabalon, Iscaron, Astaroth, Greciel, Amand. The list goes on and on about the possible demon or demons that Father Urbain Grandier sent down to haunt these nuns. Considering his character was already getting called into question, it wasn't difficult for people to believe that he'd called upon Asmodeus to do his evil bidding. A trial took place following the reports, but the verdict of guilt was swift, and after some extensive torture, Father Urbain Grandier was put to death by being burned at the stake for making dealings with the devil. Number 4 on this list is from a Reddit user called McCallum. They tell a very interesting story of how their friend got possessed by a demon in a newly purchased house and the ramifications of that. I think they do a good job telling the story, so for the purposes of this video, I'm going to quote their post. When I was in high school, my friend moved into a farmhouse. That house had a barn and a basement with stairs that led to nowhere. The previous owner killed himself in the barn because, and they put this in quotations here, the resident told me to. When moving into this house, my friend would never step into the barn. Not once would she even walk towards it. We thought it would be fun to have a seance because we were young and stupid. We had the candles and everything. I was sitting next to Katie, the one who lived there, and all of a sudden, when asking if whoever was there could show themselves, Katie then squeezed my hand so hard. The candlelight wavered and she turned her head so slow to meet my eyes. What she said I will never forget. "Let's go to the barn. Someone's there who wants to talk to us." I let go of her hand and stood up. My other friends there turned on the lights and she blinked at us. What happened? To this day, she can't remember that night. A week after our seance, her dad was found in that barn. He shot himself, and in his letter he said, "I'm sorry, I had to listen," as if something had told him to do it. This is a true story. It could have been coincidences back to back, but it will always scare me. So that's a really interesting story, and it reminded me of a tale that we talked about on this channel previously. In Scotland, many centuries ago, the settlers of the area defied a witch by taking over her land and not upholding the bargain that they'd struck with her. They eventually went on to kill her. This caused this witch to haunt the area, and most specifically the barn that was there. Now, we don't know where this place was, and I would find it an overwhelming coincidence if this happened to be the same Scottish barn, but I wouldn't be surprised if a similar story is what caused a demon to haunt this place. Sadly, I couldn't find out exactly who the demon was in the place the Reddit user described, but it's possible that it has been there for hundreds of years, preying on anyone who enters its lair. Number 3 on this list is the demon Dagon. This demon was prevalent in possessing people during what we call now the Louveniers possessions. This was a series of demonic possessions that occurred at the Louveniers convent in 1647. In this instance, 18 separate individuals claimed that they had been possessed by a demon. This all started with 18-year-old sister Madeleine Bavent. She was the first victim of these demonic possessions and was the first one to come forward about her story. Up until that point, her life had been very hard and she was often mistreated growing up. If what she claims was actually true, then that mistreatment carried over into her adulthood as well. Father Thomas Boule was the current leader of the convent and succeeded Father Mathurin Picard for the title. Father Mathurin Picard had died earlier that year. However, it was said that both men were responsible for having demons possess these nuns, with Father Picard's spirit being present during the proceedings. It was reported that these two men took Sister Madeleine Bavent to a witch's sabbat, and when they were there, married her to the devil and had him perform sexual acts with her. This was accompanied by the disembowelment and murder of 2 other men that were present at this ritual. Madeleine referred to the devil as Dagon and said that that was the name that he had given to himself. After Madeleine came forth, so did a bunch of other nuns as well. The count finally got up to 18 of them who had come forward, and they all told a similar tale. There were also reports of these nuns speaking in tongues, contorting their bodies, and levitating, just as somebody might if they were possessed by a demon. Public exorcisms were held, and the entire town showed up to watch as these nuns were exorcised of the demons that had been forced upon them. Father Thomas Boule was in the thick of it now, and there was nothing to save him from being burnt at the stake. However, it's also interesting to note that Madeleine Bavent was also sent to the dungeons to live out the rest of her days. I'm not really sure the logic behind that decision, considering she was the victim of Father Thomas Boule and also the demon Dagon, but I guess they did things differently back then. Number 2 on this list is the demon Riga. This story comes from another Reddit user. They say that they don't remember any of it, but this happened to them when they were only 2 years old. Apparently one evening this person, when they were only 2, was lying awake in bed and they started screaming at the top of their lungs. Now, this isn't completely uncommon for a 2-year-old to do, but what happens next is, I'm going to quote their post here as they say, "I got off the bed and started running in circles while screaming and crying in terror. It was not a nightmare since I was awake, and I was not playing nor demanding anything since I was just scared out of my mind. Nothing like this had ever happened before. I was the only child in the house. This went on for some random time at night and until dawn. It would only stop at dawn. I did this every single night, non-stop, for 6 months. End quote. Now that is definitely a strange thing for a 2-year-old to be doing, and quite demonic if you ask me. The parents knew that this was a big problem. Their child would claw and bite at them whenever they tried to calm him, and they weren't sure how to handle it. Eventually they decided that going to a priest was the right thing to do, but even they couldn't find the answer. They apparently visited as many priests as they could, but still the problem persisted. That was right up until one priest, while performing a ritual on this child, managed to extract some information. It turns out that our Reddit user was possessed by a demon, and that demon's name was Riga. They couldn't get a whole lot more information, however they did learn that Riga was an inhabitant of not only the child, but also the home. The parents understood exactly what this meant, and wasting no time at all, they moved houses. This clearly was the problem, because the second that they got to a new residence, the demonic possession, Riga, ceased, and their baby, our Reddit user, was calm. Sometimes these demons will only possess us for a time, and when they get what they want, which in this case was for these people to leave their house, then they'll also leave. Number 1 on this list is the demon Baal Berith. This demon was rampant in possessing people in the Aeon province possessions. Similar to some of the other cases that we've looked at today, this pandemic of possessions made its way through a convent of nuns. Clearly, these nuns really had it rough during the early 17th century. The first report to come out came from Madeleine de Demandaux. She was an aristocrat who joined the Ursuline convent at Marseille in 1607. It wasn't long before she'd reported to the Mother Superior that she actually had an affair with Father Louis Goffardy, who was also at that convent. The Mother Superior was obviously shocked at this news and thought it best to remove Madeleine and send her to Aix. This was to get her away from Father Goffardy and distance her from the scandal. It was when she got to her new location though that she started to notice the symptoms of demonic possession. In 1609, Madeleine started to exhibit all of our classic telltale signs. This included convulsions, foaming at the mouth, speaking devilish languages, reacting strangely to religious paraphernalia. These symptoms spread like a disease to all of the other nuns that were close to Madeleine, and similarly to my other entries on this list, you immediately had a bunch of nuns that were now demonically possessed. These nuns were hit hard with these demonic possessions as well, with a lot of them speaking a voice that wasn't their own. The church responded swiftly and started performing exorcisms as best as they could. Most attempts though were unsuccessful. However, it was during one of these exorcisms in 1910 that Father Goffardy's name was thrown into the mix. Madeleine claimed that he seduced her and brought her to a demonic ritual. This ritual was used to summon the demon Baal Berith, which then possessed Madeleine. Other nuns started to make the same claim, and soon Father Goffardy's name was completely run through the dirt. During a session of torture, he confessed to the crimes and was sentenced to death. This case of a demon possessing a group of nuns was the first one in France and set the precedent for the other two that I've previously spoken about.